Mike, check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and I wanted to talk really quickly about two things. First, I wanted to talk about a generational shift that I'm noticing in retro video game collecting, and then also I wanted to show you about 5 pickups that I was able to make today while out in the wild. Added a few pieces that I'm going to be bringing with me to my trade event, so a lot of really cool stuff there. So I wanted to talk about the changing of guards when it comes to what we're going to start seeing happening in retro game collecting going into 2025, particularly around the NES. Now, the NES for some time has been slowly moving into the Atari territory when it comes to NES values. There are a lot of NES games. I want to say more than half of the NES library is probably going right now for under $10, or at least under $20. There are not a lot of NES games that break the $30 or $40 mark, and even the ones that we're starting to see dips. A few notable NES games that are in my collection, and I do have a pretty decent NES collection, but some standout titles for me would be Batman, Return of the Joker, a very good Batman game. Silver Surfer, another really cool kind of like shoot 'em up style game in a way. Then you obviously have Shadow of the Ninja. This is a classic right here. They actually remade this game on the Switch, but this is a very, very fun game. A short game, but a fun game on the NES. You've got Ninja Gaiden 3. Again, another classic ninja action platformer style game on the NES. You've got a cool beat 'em up like River City Ransom on the NES. And then you've even got some games that have been, ported to multiple platforms. Battletoads, we've seen Battletoads on the NES, the Super Nintendo, the Sega Genesis, Game Boy. So this has been on multiple platforms, but it definitely is on the NES. And then we've got really, really obscure titles like Shatterhand. This is a game that we've really, I think, only seen on the NES. We haven't seen a remake of this. I would have loved to see there be like a Shatterhand 2 that was made for perhaps the Super Nintendo, but this story, this game pretty much lived and ended on the NES. And so there are some titles on the NES that are standout, some really great titles that will make you want to go out and pick up the system. I mean, outside of emulating these games, of course, but we're starting to see that shift where there really isn't much interest in these NES games at this point. I feel like a lot of the novelty and nostalgia for this generation has ran its course and it's pretty much worn out. The Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis are definitely next. I think both of those consoles are somewhat on their last legs as well. The difference between the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis era is that so many of the games from that era are iconic and the good games are iconic. So it's a little bit harder to kind of forget them because they're always being pushed to the forefront, especially when you start talking about retro collecting and things like that. And then a lot of those games are also being kept alive by, things like the Nintendo Online service that is continuously adding, Super Nintendo games and Genesis games and things like that. So, but I think that, like I said, a lot of the standout titles on the NES, the really good games, are games that most people have never really heard of because they were never popular like commercially. And I think that is going to cause, if it hasn't already caused, the NES library to fall into the Atari zone. So, I think a lot of like collectors, whenever they're out collecting, if they see like a gray cartridge, they're automatically drawn to it because they think, oh, it's retro, it's old school. And we're prone to just kind of looking to see, okay, what old school items can we get? But when you realize that you're looking at like a copy of Mario Duck Hunt or Excite Bike, or, these are games that if you're out in the wild and someone's trying to charge you $10 for them, you know that these are games that you can pick up for $3, $4, $5. You could pick a lot of these games up in lots and pay next to nothing for them. So I don't know where it will go. I don't know if a game like Shatterhand will eventually go down to 15, $20. There was a point in time where you couldn't give NES games away. That's how cheap they were. But then around, 2004, 2000, between 2004, 2006, we saw that bump. And obviously, when 2020 came, everything shot up. Now, Pat the NES Punk was asked about 5 years ago where he thought NES values would be 10 years from then. So we're about 5 years away from that 10-year mark for the question that he was asked. And his response was that he felt like, you know, pretty much 75% or more of the library would be pretty much worthless. I'm paraphrasing. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he basically said that a lot of these games would lose their value, with the exception of the rare exceptions. Right? There are always rare exceptions in libraries that maintain their value, but he felt like a lot of them would lose their value, and a lot of that is because one, people aren't looking to collect or play them anymore. And I think what becomes the final nail in the coffin is that resellers aren't looking for them anymore, because resellers realize they can't make any money on these games anymore. They can't flip them because there isn't the market for them has either shrank or is gone. And once resellers start moving away from an item or something, that's when you start to really see prices for those items drop. It's the same thing that we see in sneakers. If there's a shoe that resellers cannot make money on, then you instantly see that item sit. The demand is almost non-existent and prices immediately get slashed. And we saw that happen a lot this year. We'll probably continue to see it happen next year. So very interesting stuff. Let me know down in the comments what you think about the NES moving into this, Atari-like state in terms of collecting. What do you think it means for retro collecting as a whole? And how long do you think it will be before we see the same thing happen to the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis, basically that fourth generation of gaming? All right, now it's on to a few items that I picked up that I'm going to be bringing to this trade event. The first up is I picked up a very cool copy of Friday on VHS. This is one that I'm definitely going to have for sale. Very good copy of Friday. Friday is a classic VHS movie. And again, I know it's not anything sci-fi. I know it's not, like Star Wars or superhero based, but this is such a cult classic for a lot of people that this is one that I will have there. So I figured I'd bring that one with me. Then we have Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, which is a pretty cool DVD. I was shocked when I saw that copies of this DVD were going still for close to $20 online. I've never seen Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie, but I did watch Yu-Gi-Oh! The cartoon as a kid. Very interesting. I fell off, obviously, but this is definitely a cool one to have on display. It's just cool to see Yu-Gi-Oh! For those who are into it. Then you have Saw, the unrated edition. So I thought this was really cool, especially again with Halloween coming up. I mean, this makes for a great Halloween DVD for you to check out. So this is one that I will have as well. And then I picked up a couple of retro games at a local GameStop, which lo and behold, I was surprised that they had retro games. But you have Tekken 4 on the PlayStation 2. This was complete in box. Pretty cool find. I'm not gonna lie, this was a cool one to find. I'm a fan of the Tekken games. The controls are so different from what you would use in like a Street Fighter, but it's definitely a fun game or a fun franchise nonetheless. And then Simpsons Hit and Run, which I thought was a pretty good deal on this for a Simpsons Hit and Run. This is complete in box, and the manual is in like top tier condition, so that manual is in great shape. So and I know that this is close to market value. I think with the manual, Simpsons Hit and Run goes for anywhere between like 50 and 60 bucks. So this is a pretty clean pickup as well. I will also have this available for sale or for trade at the trade event. So just made a few last minute pickups, just some things that, to keep the table interesting. I like to bring quality items whenever I go anywhere, whenever I'm doing a trade. I don't just like to bring all my sports games and all like my you know, fluff and all the stuff I don't want out of my collection. I try to bring things that I know people will want. So I will have some really good items with me. But yeah, that does it for me. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Do you think, how long will it take for prices for NES, for Super Nintendo and Genesis games to fall completely off? And what do you think about this changing of the guard, so to speak, when it comes to these retro games and their place in terms of retro game collecting? All right, that does it for me. It's the Y2K Collector. I will catch you in the next video. Take it easy.